Okay, it should also be noted that the song before the house music started was actually a Canadian band, so it was kind of interesting that the Canadian speaker has the Canadian intro kind of music. All right, so today's talk is practice what you preach. And at one point there was going to be a whole preacher theme to my slides, which if you've seen my decks are lots of images. But it's really, really, really hard to find appropriate graphics from the Preacher comic if you've read it. So this is about as much as you get of Preacher, as much as I would love to. Okay, so when you start speaking, generally they tell you in the unofficial speaking school, there are 3 rules to abide by when doing public speaking. 1, don't spend time on an introduction. 2, don't start with an apology. And 3, don't do live anything. Sorry, I forgot there was another. So let's break some rules because that's what they're there for. So introduction, I'm Adam Goucher, and I really don't care about your scripts, which is a fun thing to say at a Selenium conference. What I do care about, possibly too much, is where you run your scripts. My theory is if Target had the largest credit card breach in history through their air conditioning unit, I almost guarantee that somebody in this room has spun up an EC2 instance in their corporate network and had the bad guys have access that they shouldn't have had. So today we're going to learn about how to fix that. So that was rule number 1 broken. So we're going to take a little detour and talk a bit about burnout, because we're in tech and burnout's an issue. Burnout is not really an actual thing, like clinical diagnosis, but here's a good definition I found. Basically, too much stress for too long, you get overwhelmed, drained, you just sort of sit there, stare at the wall, and can't do anything. And if you are feeling burnt out, there are, or other mental health issues that you're experiencing, here's a pretty useful resource. It's run out of the States, open sourcing mental illness. They've got workbooks that you can give your employers, or if you are a manager, how to make your place of employment safer mentally for the employees. So this is breaking rule number 2, because my original plan for this talk was, let's take this simplistic AWS deployment of Selenium Grid, and it was going to be 100% code. I'm going to push a button, bunch of stuff would flash on the screen, run a test, and there'd be no slides. I've been burnt out like mad for the last year, excessively burnt out for the last 3 months, which is the time I was going to develop this. So you're getting some code and some slides. But all the concepts are still there, just not as cool as I want it to be. So this is the reason it's part 3 is, again, I've been on this soapbox for your infrastructure matters more than your scripts for a while now. In Austin, I did a talk which was rambly even for me, talking about a whole bunch of concepts. In Chicago, I used the AWS well-architected framework to sort of structure that talk. Same basic concepts, wrapped in a nice framework. And to manage your infrastructure. But the same framework can apply to Azure or Google Cloud or whatever. It's just a way of thinking. So in London, it was supposed to be all the code. We've got some of the code. So we hit escape, we flip around. There'll be lots of window switching. So pretend that we have or maybe not pretend, look at that, we even have internet. This whole thing falls apart if the internet goes away. So please stop downloading everything. So we've got our Amazon cloud thing, our cloud account right now. Loading. Oh, I'm in the wrong zone because that's useful. Nothing more paranoia-inducing than logging into accounts and seeing no instances when you're supposed to. Or in this case, there are no instances. We have an empty account. But what we have is, we could also go here, while we're in the console, now we got to talk about the thing that I just changed, security credentials. First thing you do when you're starting an account, there's two ways you interact with AWS. There's what's called the root account. This is your master account for all other accounts. You need to protect the heck out of this thing. Your root account should never have, or should always have MFA tokens installed, and not like software tokens that sit on your phone, but hardware ones are about $45, surprisingly, on Amazon. And those should be locked away somewhere securely, legitimately in a security, in like your corporate safety deposit box. It's fireproof or whatever. It is a pain in the butt to get a hardware token reissued if you lose this thing. Your root account should also not have any access keys. And in fact, Amazon will yell at you if you try and do it. It'll let you, but it'll tell you that you're doing something stupid. All right, while we're in here, all we have in this account is a single group. There are no users on this group. There is a user, it is me. So we switch browsers, so we can have multi-sessions. This user has a software MFA token turned on, and it has, I don't know, I'm looking at the screen, I've got this one in front of me, and it's got access tokens so I can use the API. The only time you create an account, create a root account, add hardware MFA, create an IAM user, and then get the heck out of the root account. So we've got a blank slate here. So we do the Betty Crocker way of doing live typing, which is to not type. So, oh, that's fun. If I'm in the right part 3, Terraform, paste. All right, so the tool that I'm using here is called Terraform. It's part of the HashiCorp suite. I believe previously I said if you're using Amazon, you should use CloudFormation. If you're using Google Cloud, you should use their tool. I'm now completely converted onto using Terraform, especially for building out Selenium clouds, because it is cloud agnostic, because we might want to interact with something outside of Amazon or outside of Azure or wherever we're running. And you can't do that with CloudFormation. Terraform is basically, try and type and talk at the same time. It's basically just a wrapper around the APIs. And so as soon as the API is available, somebody at Terraform adds it to their API. And because we're at SeleniumConf, it's nice that it's also open source, which we happen to like here. So there's, this is not a Terraform tutorial, but there is a book that just got released, Terraform Up and Running, 2nd edition. Literally 2 or 3 weeks ago it came out. My copy is winging its way home. All right, I think we'll flip back here while that runs. Oh, I even had a slide for that. Yeah, so Mac Cloud, it's multi-cloud. It's just a DSL around APIs. Allows you to store your state so you can look and see in a text file where things are. It's open source. All right. Meanwhile, this is running. Oh, and it fell down, which in this case is actually not a bad thing. It's like I actually ran through these, because that becomes a teachable moment where we start doing this sort of stuff. All right, so again, here is our modern Selenium cloud. And again, this is about 5 minutes of me thinking about the components and 2 hours of how to draw a nice diagram, because that's usually how these things work. So the reason that the console, creating our environment failed is because it got to the point where I turned on a rule that said all console interactions or API interactions require MFA tokens. So it's kind of this 2-step thing where I don't have a rule. Then I apply the rule, and the rule kicks in, and then it doesn't allow me to run the scripts anymore. So let's go look at what that might look like. If I could find it. almost readable. Look at that. So if you're administrating AWS or any other environments, you need to understand how to write rules for permissions, because by default, everything is wide open, not a good security stance. So basically, I've applied a rule onto the administrators group that says the only thing that they're allowed to do is turn on MFA. And or if they don't have MFA turned on, then they can also do MFA actions. So that broke our console. So you can see, yes, unauthorized operation. So we go back to our console, and this is kind of a pain in the butt, but one thing you learn is that security is all about trade-offs and becoming a pain in the butt. So what you have to do is get temporary tokens. So I will just look at my phone, which of course has a billion notifications on it now because I can't look at them. 263.836. So this is a token that is good for 30 seconds, for a minute. That gives me a whole bunch of things. There are scripts that you can find. I haven't found one I really like, so let me just chat amongst yourselves while I copy and paste. Or just sit there quietly. So one thing we can see up here where we tried, there was going to be 23 things to add. Run that same command over again. Now we only have 5 things to run because, again, it ran a bunch of things and then it failed out on the security. So then we are going to flip over to slide. What do we want to do? All right, so while this is working away, we'll go over here. Oops, apparently we're going to drag things around. All right, so the first thing that it did was the networking stuff. Because it sits in the cloud needs to be accessed by network. So all new accounts in Amazon, where new is probably the last 8 or 9 years, you get what is called a virtual private cloud, or VPC. There are currently 4 different scenarios for VPCs. Scenario 1 is everything is publicly available. Scenario 2 is a public and private network. And then 3 and 4 involve VPNs into data centers and whatnot. I highly recommend that everybody set up their Selenium setup in a VPC scenario 2 VPC. So what you end up with is a public VPC, that's the greenish side over here, and then the private network on the other side, which is the bluish. Nothing in here is accessible from the internet. It can reach out to the internet to get patches and what have you, but we as people cannot access it on the internet. So security through obscurity is generally not a good thing, but here is this first layer that you can sit your hub and all your grid nodes where they can't actually even be accessed from the internet at large, which is a first line of defense. What do you got? Next slide. All right. But we do probably want to actually get into these instances every once in a while. So we can do a couple things. In this case, what I've done is created a Bastion host. So this is the only actual EC2 instance that will be sitting in the public network. It has a static IP. It should probably get like an entry in Route 53 for DNS, all of which Terraform can take care of. So we will hit escape, go to the right window, maybe even the right window, find our IP address. So now, before we had no instances running, We now have one that is still being slow to load because of course it is. Go there. All right, so we should be able to, if it was running. This has been fast the last 6 or 7 times I've run it. There we go. All right, so let's try and connect to it. And of course, it's going to fail because we haven't actually told EC2 to let us in. By default, the boxes are closed. So if we come back here, you'll see, or possibly we'll see, we've got a security group called allow SSH. I can't tell if that's fuzzy just because it's close. But what the security group does is basically say, don't allow anybody in yet. So we're going to implement a poor person's VPN by actually remembering to grab this. And we're going to dynamically add a rule. Oops, I'm going to copy the wrong thing. Paste this time. Oh, and what? Grab our current IP. You're going to have a script that does this automatically from your home. What is my IP? What IP is this? And what this is going to say, what this is going to do is create a rule or modify the rule allowing me access into this box. So in the span of 10 minutes or so, we've gone from no EC2 instances to an EC2 instance that is up, and it allows access from precisely one IP address, which will then allow us to do other fun stuff like get into our network. So flip back here. So again, there's Elastic IP. This is basically a static IP that will stay the same. And you can connect to it, and you imagine working from home. This is your cheap version of a VPN. Okay. So, quick detour. We have. Am I missing a slide? I'm missing a picture. There's a whole bit of build-out stuff that shouldn't be here. All right. Okay, so we have these instances that were brought up. They are should be treated as cattle, not pets. I think Simon said that, used that phrase in his keynote. The general idea is these machines should be disposable. They are all created by scripts. I know in the past I've had these boxes that if they went away, bad things would happen because I had made all sorts of configuration changes. Another part of the HashiCorp toolset is called Packer, and it will create your images for you, or your AMIs. And it allows you to just get the boxes ready to start. And it can do things like make sure that your hub is running, and make sure, install the latest version of the hub, make sure it's running, putting your SSH keys and stuff on. But you should not store your secrets in just clear text in your repos. AWS does have a secrets manager, which is a secure way of accessing these tokens, which would allow you to not have to do things like, let's just add some keys. Everybody, feel free to avert your eyes if you SSH, and then we have to go grab our key because we don't have it on the box. Just a throwaway key. Doesn't matter if you try and write it. Everyone sees how badly you type when you do this sort of thing. That's why they say don't do live code, because the internet will go away and everyone realizes you can't type or spell. Or okay, what do we got here? Right, so we should be using Secrets Manager to do what I just did. And so in this case, I'm using Packer with Puppet. It can use Chef or Ansible or any other of these configuration tools. Again, Packer is open source, so they play with everybody. I would probably, had I done this all over again, be using Ansible to configure things, because AWS just announced literally last week, because that's convenient, that you can run through AWS System Manager Ansible playbooks. So that allows me to, through the console, update configuration live on the boxes without having to log into the EC2 instances themselves. In a perfect world, you would never log into an EC2 instance. It configures itself and then removes the SSH keys, because that's another layer of security. If somebody can't log into the box, they can't own the box. Okay, so right now we're logged into the Bastion host. Where's the KNS? Over here. But the purpose of that is to log into the hub. So again, I just added my key onto the machine. So there is the need to get the IP address for that one. And again, just like the logging into the box for the Bastion host. Yes. And then in theory, we should see Selenium. Awkward if it didn't. All right. So so we're now logged in the private network. And the only machine that can access it is the Bastion host, and the Selenium hub is running. What enables that, here's another fun trick. So what we've done is on the hub, there's a different security group called internal SSH. It is also on the Bastion host, and this is kind of advanced security group tricks. Access is allowed into this machine by the security group, and the security group actually references itself. So any instance that you put this security group on, it kind of becomes a cloud. It's almost like a tag cloud, where if it's tagged with this security group, then you can get access into it. So you don't actually need to know all the IP addresses and the instance IDs, so you just sort of throw it around. It's useful if you have like a load balancer and a bunch of instances that you want to contact. Put it on the load balancer, put it on all the instances. My day job's security group setup got a lot simpler when I realized that, because there was a whole bunch of scripts that were, when an instance comes up, change the IP address. So we're now logged in. There is proof that Selenium Grid is running, or at least proof-ish. So what else are things that we need to do inside our grid, or inside of our modern cloud? This one I mention every time. There is a tool, part of the AWS toolkit, and there's lots of AWS stuff here, but Azure and Google Cloud have the same things. Something called CloudTrail, which basically logs every API action that happens within your account. This is useful for, oops, we were hacked. We can figure out what happened because the API, we can reverse the API calls, and we can figure out who did what, how things went awry. One of the things that you can do with CloudTrail is use CloudTrail to kind of monitor CloudTrail itself. There's kind of CloudTrail inception. So what you can do is when CloudTrail sees a certain action, like disable CloudTrail, which is one of the first things the bad guys would want to do, turn off all the security. So you can say, have CloudTrail watch for the action of turning off CloudTrail, which can pump a message out onto simple notification service, which then can call a Lambda function, which will turn on CloudTrail again, because it's all just API calls. And it can also send you an email. I haven't quite wrapped my head around how far you need to go to like really set this up. Like, do I need to have a wrapper around the email notification has been disabled? And what if that email notification is disabled and that other email notification disabled? But that's a fun thing to do. I don't know, I keep saying fun in terms of setting up infrastructure, which is kind of weird. But CloudTrail could monitor itself, so you could always have a record of the API calls. This is basically step one when you call up Amazon and say help. They're like, okay, show us the CloudTrail logs. And if you don't have it turned on, then they're like, yeah, we can't help you. So there's CloudTrail. Everybody should turn it on. The other thing that everyone should do, and this is one of these things you kind of learn the hard way, is you should also turn on billing alerts, because Amazon is more than happy to just hook up a very large vacuum to your wallet and just keep hoovering away at it without telling you. So you can set up billing alerts. Basically, it's in CloudWatch. You say, if this metric, which is estimated monthly spend, is over a certain amount, send me an email or whatever. On my one of my side hustle accounts, it's $40 a month. I get an email if I approach $40. At work, it's like if we approach $1,500 or something a month, then it's sends an email of just, hey, something's going on, because all it takes is one person to light up a 4 times extra large box that costs $25 an hour and then goes home because they were distracted, and that thing just keeps churning out the cash. And our scripts, especially when we're building a grid, are often a cost center, so we actually want to understand what our costs are. This also means that we need to tag all of our resources, because that's how Amazon, you can attribute your costs. So you can tag your Windows hubs or Windows nodes as Windows and whatnot, so you can see in your bill where your money is going. Speaking of the Windows hubs, or Windows nodes, and I really only have Windows nodes here because, quite frankly, I have not met a customer that runs people's websites in a headless browser. So why are you bothering to test headless? Similarly, I don't know too many Mac or Linux customers. I'm sure they exist. This room is not really representative of that statement, but your customers, by and large, are going to be on Windows or mobile device, as like the Sauce Labs guy had on his slide. So your nodes should be running in what's called an autoscaling group. You can change a single number, and you'll get more instances added to it automatically. The fun thing about autoscaling is you can autoscale it to 0, which means you're not incurring any costs. So if you know that you run your or you do not run your scripts overnight at 9 o'clock in the evening, you can automatically scale it down to 0. 7 o'clock in the morning, you scale it back up to what your grid would normally do. Amazon also has 3 different sort of billing categories for instances. There are just per hour, per usage instances. There are reserved instances where you pay for a year commitment, whether or not you use it or not. And then there are what are called spot instances, which is basically a marketplace where people who have bought reserved instances that aren't being used try and recoup some of their costs and sell it cheaper. So you can have these instances. You can say, well, normally this is a 15 cents an hour instance. I'm willing to pay 7 cents an hour for this instance, and somebody will sell you that time because they've already paid for it, and if they can have to only commit to paying 8 cents an hour instead of the full 15 cents, that's a good deal for them. So run your nodes as spot instances in autoscaling groups, Again, these things are going to be all configured automatically through your scripts when they come up. One thing that I've started to think about, I haven't actually implemented yet, is with Autoscaling Groups, they have Lifecycle Events. They're sort of like starting, running, shutting down. In there, I think there's interesting opportunities for modifying security groups, especially for access onto the hub node, because there is a security vector there where the hub will happily accept connections from anybody that claims to be a node, and so we kind of need to tighten that up. I would use the lifecycle events to say, hello node, you're allowed to accept connections from this particular instance, so at least you know it's being lit up from the auto-scaling group and not just somebody who has managed to compromise your system and started a node up. All right. Actually, I have a note to troll headless in Linux. I think I did that. Okay, one thing that I think is super important to run inside any grid or any even standalone Selenium setup that seems to be lost in time but kind of getting picked up through the Google Dev Tools is run all of your scripts through a scriptable proxy. Wow, talking's a thing. This allows you to do all sorts of fun things to your traffic. Odds are, unless you're a social media company, you're not testing your integration with Facebook for the little widget. All that does is slow down your website's loading time. So in a scriptable proxy, you're able to say, just black hole all traffic to Facebook, black hole Google Analytics, so that you're just testing your own environment. You could also say, throttle my traffic because your website looks fantastic on your corporate network. It looks less awesome in the back corner of Costco, which is a giant concrete bunker on somebody's phone. At my day job, we do mobile marketing. We get burned by that all the time. So scriptable proxy allows us to test that sort of thing. Again, it's an EC2 instance, all configured up automatically. There are security groups allowing the nodes to actually talk through it. So here's the real kicker of why I converted over mentally into Terraform from CloudFormation. My work stuff is all CloudFormation, like we're 100% AWS. But were I to do it again, I would start with Terraform. But I think it really makes sense in a Selenium context because running your scripts on Mac is challenging in AWS because they don't actually offer emulated Mac instances. But there are providers out there that do entirely that. One of them is MacStadium. They use VMware that you can light things up. Terraform has a provider to actually configure it. So the same way that you configure AWS or any other cloud provider, you can connect light up a Mac instance, which will talk through our public subnet, through a load balancer, into our hub and register itself. Oh, look at that. All right, so this promised some Selenium 4.0 stuff. Technically, this script is running the latest alpha. So this is kind of where I say there's a workshop tomorrow to write to help commit a patch. And I don't want to have to write this, so if somebody wants to do it, that's fantastic. Again, from a security perspective, right now, all of the WebDriver communication in the grid is just HTTP, not HTTPS. This is a really challenging thing to explain if you're in a regulated environment where everything needs to be over secure channels. So somebody, please, because then I don't have to do it, take the latest Selenium and patch it to be able to run custom certificates. So you can run HTTPS by default to talk between the grid and from your scripts to the grid or to the hub, and the hub to their nodes. There's also another issue that I kind of touched on, which is node self-registration. I strongly think that we need to consider a solution where you say this particular instance is authorized to connect to the hub. I don't have a good solution to that one, but for Selenium 4, I think this is our opportunity to start introducing that level of change. And then we hit escape again. And of course, because everything here is scripted, we can exit out of that machine, exit out of that machine. 3 minutes and 56 seconds to go. Because it is scriptable, we can, without any fear, tear it all down when we're done. Let me tell you how terrifying this is when you've got multiple profiles all in your account and you hit destroy and it's like, did I just take down production? So quickly I moved out of my actual account. And so now we are going to be going back to our base state. There'll be a race to see which finishes, not that one. So we can see our nodes are shutting down, all of our rules are being taken out, all of our security groups are being taken out. And the internet actually behaved. Do I have another slide? All right, so we'll put this up. So again, the original idea was this talk was basically just run Terraform and have a whole bunch of things happen and prove it to you. It ended up being a lot more slides than I had hoped, but there's lots of things in there that I threw at you in 38 and a half minutes, because there's a big clock there. Hopefully one or two of those will stick and you can take it back to your workplace either later this week or even immediately if you need to go turn on MFA on your accounts. That's a very good thing. Or CloudTrail. I have had people after this talk, versions of this talk, come up to me and like, how do I enable CloudTrail? And like do it right away, which is a good thing. I'm more than happy to help you do that. So hopefully something stuck and you got some value out of this. Because it's only going to get more complicated from here. And that's it.